Hello and welcome to another K6 Office Hours. I am Nicole van der Hoeven, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Tom Miseur.
Hello.
Yay!
Woo.
Tell us about yourself. When did you join K6? What do you do?
Sure. Yeah, I joined K6 about 6 months ago. I've been in the load testing arena for quite a while now, and yeah, really excited to be here, and looking forward to share some tips and tricks that I've learned in the time I've since I've been here. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Tom is actually a performance tester by background. And at K6, I think you do a bunch of different things. Sometimes you answer some customer support questions as well, but you also go on actual engagements with K6, right?
Yep. So we provide professional services. So sometimes our customers either don't have the time themselves to create scripts, or perhaps they're looking to just offload everything from script creation through to test execution and results analysis. So we obviously have a lot of experience with that, because it's what we do all the time. So we're able to help pretty quickly as well. We're able to get scripts up and running quickly. So if you're in a hurry and need and need testing done quickly, then that's definitely something we provide.
I also think that it's really different because when we provide the tool and we provide support for the tool, but how to use K6 is very different from how to run a load testing project. Or we can help you normally with questions about how to do something, how to implement your testing plan in K6, or if you have an idea already of your workload model. But sometimes we get customers who don't really have the capacity or the experience within their teams to do load testing, and that's where Tom comes in.
Hmm. Yeah,
How do you like it so far?
it's been great. Yeah, I really enjoy working for K6, and seeing what kinds of things our customers are testing. Uh, yeah, it's never a dull moment.
Yeah, I was really happy when I got to know you because I was happy to have another performance tester on the team. And I think that we got to talking about a lot of the same problems that we both had when we were starting to use K6. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I were both from the same world where we have certain expectations of a load testing tool. And at least for me, K6 was very different from other tools that I'd tried before. Would you
Mhm.
say the same?
Yep, yeah, that's true. There's pros and cons to different tools. What I really liked about K6 was, the fact that we have K6 Cloud, where you have a really nice web UI for looking at your tests when they're running, and looking at the results there as well. So easy to share results with others. You can create these magic links and just send that to someone that can see exactly what you see as well. And also the ability of having multiple people able to see the same test as it is running. It's particularly useful if you're running into problems.
Mm-hmm.
The devs can be looking at the results in real time as well. And so they can also then look at what's happening on the server side to see if they can figure out why there's a sudden spike in performance when you reach 2,000 virtual users. So it makes it really convenient.
Yeah. I definitely, I mean, we always like to talk about the good things about K6, but we're also not afraid to talk about areas where maybe we could improve a little bit. Sometimes it's a case of K6, the tool itself, needing improvement. Sometimes it's about educating people how to use K6. And I think one of the things that makes K6 so performant is the fact that we are very vigilant about what we allow into K6 because we've seen from other load testing tools where they try to add all the features, which is great because you can support more people and more use cases. But that's always at a cost, right? Every little
Mm,
bit that you add adds extra overhead because everybody who uses K6 is going to be downloading that binary regardless of whether they use those extra features.
mhm.
So I think the philosophy of the team, and Mihail, who is one of the K6 OSS developers, has been on previous office hours as well. And he said that he really wants to keep it contained and composable and able to work with other extensions or other technologies.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, actually, we're seeing a bit of a shift. I feel like, where uh, the industry as a whole seems to be um, tired of proprietary protocols and shifting to open protocols. Gone are the days of applications like SAP using their own binary proprietary protocol that you can't make any sense of if you're recording the network packets, or it they get really messy really fast. And there's load testing tools out there that support these archaic protocols, and I won't name name the one I'm thinking of, but it's sounding like some of these protocols are being dropped in favor of becoming
You're talking about Citrix, aren't you?
yeah, basically. Yeah,
I
and
use a
it's a
pain
lot
to
of
load
bloat.
test.
Yeah, and it's a pain to maintain as well. So yeah, we're in a good place with K6 with our support for HTTP, WebSocket, and gRPC. So, and yeah, that's why we have XK6 as well. As Mustafa says, we have the ability to incorporate other protocols when it's appropriate. So that's great.
And James Leatherman says, all the things as code.
Yes.
That's certainly the trend these days. So when I first started, when I ran K6 for the first time, and I think that's actually on my week of testing videos, I think I kept that part in, but there was a moment where I ran the test and a bunch of text flew by. I was like, what what does that mean? Did it pass? Where's the I'm used to seeing a lot more feedback, and K6 is meant to be to cut out all of the extra things that maybe not everybody really wants. And so an initial struggle for me was, how do I figure out what actually happened in my script? I know it ran, but how did it go?
Mhm.
Did you have the same experience?
Yeah, actually, yeah. And, I think I'm trying to remember. We made some changes fairly recently that really highlighted, unexpected status codes for. But I remember running a script, and it ran through to completion, but I knew that there was something not right with it, and I seem to recall that the default output didn't really highlight it as much as I would imagine it might. So these days, I think we have we will notify you if there's any status codes received in the 400 to 500 range, and so that's at least some hint that something's going wrong. But I find myself using a function that prints out the response body typically when there's an unexpected status code, and so I have a function that I reuse all over the place that allows me to do that easily. We'll have a look at that later if there's time.
Oh, Sima's in the chat as well. Sima, who is normally my co host, but is on vacation. Apparently, not enough of a vacation because he's still watching this on a Friday night afternoon. But hi, Sima. um, okay, so the reason that I was excited to have you come on the show because I definitely wanted to talk about debugging.
Hmm.
And I think that if you use any sort of automated testing tool in a project, you'll realize very quickly that there are just some weird errors, or sometimes there's not even any error that makes you think, I wish I knew exactly what was happening, exactly what the response returns. There's also the problem that recording isn't foolproof. So a lot of testers, including me, like to start off with a recording, especially if it's like a full website where you want all of the requests, all of the embedded resources. But the problem is that that recording is not always replayable.
Hmm. Yep, that's right. Yeah, I find myself using recordings quite a lot. It's sort of the source of truth. There's no ambiguity about what your script should be doing. You have a recording of the traffic, and then you have something then to compare against, and that becomes really useful for the trickier flows you might encounter, and one that's coming up more and more frequently, at least in my world with professional services, is SAML single sign-on. So the SAML exchange can be fairly complex. There's a sequence of easily 10 to 15 HTTP requests if you're recording from the browser, and all of these requests will have dynamic values flowing
Yeah.
between them. So there's a lot of correlation that needs to be done, and yeah, that can be pretty tricky to do, and understand if you're just using things like console log statements. It can still take quite a while to debug that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of dynamic view states that are there for security measures, and those things are, I mean, it's always there's always something that slips through the cracks in a recorder, right? No recorder is perfect.
Hmm.
And so it sometimes it's handy to just see, okay, what was the request? What was the response? And then what exactly did that response and body entail? So it's not just 200, but it's like, did it say, was it a 200, but in the response body it says error?
Hmm. Yep, yep, it can definitely happen. Um,
Mm.
I So worth pointing out that we did just post a blog post that kind of mirrors some of the things we'll be talking about in this session as well. I guess it might make sense to put the link to that up. So I'll just go find it.
Yeah, sure. I do have it. It was posted just today, actually, a few hours
Yep.
ago. Let me post that in the chat. Um, oh, I think Flora, who's also in the chat, posted at the same time. So now you have two links over there. And Tom wrote a really nice blog post about how to debug using a web proxy, which is also what we're talking about today.
Woohoo.
So, but before we talk about the web proxy, how about we talk about things that ways that you can debug before then, like just within the K6 script. You already talked about being able to use console log statements. One thing, I do that all the time, of course, when I'm scripting. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that you don't want to leave those turned on for the most part when you're doing a high load test, because again, that adds overhead.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I found myself using console.debug. So typically, the normal one you would use is console.log. Console.debug will actually not output anything unless you're running the K6 command with the verbose flag. And that really cuts down on the amount of messages that you then output it for you to actually run the test proper with multiple virtual users. But yeah, it's very handy for that purpose.
Sima has a question for you. What is the coolest gig you've ever done as a consultant?
Oh gosh. There's been some interesting ones. I guess my the most high profile one was probably load testing the UK's COVID tracing app. So these apps that use Bluetooth in order to detect your distance from other users also using one of these apps. And then, if they then later say they've had a positive test result, you'll get pinged. And so, this was something run by the UK government, and therefore it was a pretty big deal. It was all over the news. And so, yeah, millions of people downloading the app on day one, and it had to be able to handle that traffic. Otherwise, the whole app would pretty much have been a failure. People tweeting
Yeah.
about the fact that it fell over on day one would not have been good for the app at all. So that was quite a fun little project, and it all took place during the initial lockdown. So it was just sitting at home and, and working on that. So very,
It's pretty sobering to think that what we do as performance testers can actually affect people's lives.
yeah, yeah. If only they'd realized that when they released the healthcare gov website back in the day over here in the States. That was something
Yeah.
that happened several years ago, and unfortunately it seems like they didn't load tested it. So as soon as people started using it, it just keeled over, and it was not good publicity for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, here in the Netherlands, I think I wrote a blog post about it in Dutch, but I translated it to English as well. But on the day that they opened this telephone hotline for being tested for the coronavirus, I actually called because I was sick at the time, and I got through after repeated attempts, and then when I finally got a hold of somebody, they couldn't get their, I don't know, appointment system up.
Mm-hmm.
So I we were just there stalling, waiting for a site to load for her.
Mm.
And then we got disconnected. And I thought, you
That's the
know,
worst.
yeah, this is a performance issue, and it's not just the computer parts, it's also the human parts. Because one of the issues for the coronavirus was that for the coronavirus hotline was that appointments were made and they were very efficient, in and out in 5 minutes kind of thing. But it caused huge traffic jams around the testing centers. That's still a performance issue that, yes, you should absolutely keep in mind when you're testing that whole application. Is it worthwhile to get the response time super fast if you're not going to be able to service the appointments?
Yeah,
It's
that's
an
a good point.
interesting concept.
Yeah,
But anyway, back to debug. I'm sorry, I just I got
that's all
carried
good.
away. Another thing, I really like that tip on the console log debug. I've actually never thought of using that. I just use console log and comment it out, but that is a way better thing to do. So thank you for mentioning it.
Yeah, in the early days, I'd have a is debug, a Boolean flag,
Yes.
and if I'm
Yeah.
in debug mode, then it would print out the console log statements. Otherwise, it just
Yeah.
wouldn't. So yeah,
Yeah, you can still, sometimes I still do that, but now I'll just use the debug.
pro tip.
Yeah, pro tip. And also, we were kind of talking earlier about adding text verification in so that you can verify that the response that is returned actually has the text that you're looking for. And I noticed when I was reading your blog post that you talked about this being a very common mistake in testing e-commerce websites.
Yeah, the sort of example where there might be an error within a status code 200 response is when there's you're browsing an e-commerce site and you're trying to add a product to your cart, and then it turns out the product is actually out of stock. Now that's actually a reasonable response that a server might send back to the client, and it's not necessarily an error, so it likely will be an HTTP 200. And unless you're looking for something within that response body, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between items successfully added or out of stock. And so the tricky part then is, that in itself might not seem so bad, but then, imagine if your script is then also trying to check out a cart. Well, it's not going to be able to do that because there might not be any items in the cart. And then you'll probably see a legitimate error. The server probably isn't able to handle a checkout where there's nothing to check out, and it's not something you would necessarily be able to do through the browser. The checkout button might be grayed out, but as you're just sending the HTTP, you can still call the checkout endpoint and still post as well. So
Yeah.
that's when you might start seeing some weird errors, and then that's when you have to go digging through, your previous responses in the script to see where there could have been a problem.
Yeah, and there's a lot of value in stepping through the application manually because I've been in the situation where I did have text verification, and after going to a product page, I looked for add to cart and it was passing, but when I looked at the actual response, the text add to cart was there, but the button, as you said, was disabled.
Mhm.
So you have to know whether that's the kind of application that you've got, and sometimes just looking through the HTML for a specific thing won't give you the right response or the right information about what's happening.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, it's not uncommon for users to write into support and say, "Hey, I ran my script. There's no errors, but this record or this thing my script was creating, when I log onto the site afterwards, I don't see it listed anywhere. You're like creating an order, but the order, there's no reference to it anywhere on the site when you're expecting it to be
Yeah,
there." And that's when you start thinking, well, what's going on with my script? And sometimes people assume that there's some kind of a problem with the tool K6, like
yeah,
that we're not able to submit web forms or something like that, which is not the case. It is likely some difficult to find problem within the script that needs to be fixed, and it's usually dynamic IDs or post data being sent in an unexpected format. Character encodings can sometimes mess things up. You might end up with twice encoded URL encoded values, and all sorts of fun things like that. And that kind of issue is very difficult sometimes to tell from within K6. You almost need like a third party independent observer of the HTTP conversation that's not biased in any way, and
yeah,
that's exactly what a debugging proxy provides. It's in effect looking at the conversation from outside of it, and therefore you can see exactly what's going over the wire, so to speak.
yeah. Let me actually share my screen because I also want to show sometimes how I structure my script because when I'm in the debugging phase, I sometimes it's difficult to tell sometimes which one is failing, which transaction is failing in K6. So I don't know if you do this too, but one way that I like to use is instead of having normally you would have like a default function here
Hmm.
for K6 to run, but I like to use the functions to kind of separate transactions, or we don't have transactions in K6 are pretty amorphous. They could be groups or they could be functions, but one one good reason to do that is that if I have one action and one function, then I can just keep adding them and then, removing, commenting out things. So you could have different functions here. And if you have them separated out in functions, you can also use them in scenarios. So here I've got, well, actually, let's go to this one, which is actually a chaos engineering one. So you can see I've commented that out, but now I've got two scenarios and each one of them is running a specific function. So where that's useful is that if you have many, many requests in a single transaction and something fails, how do you know that how do you determine which one was the one that failed? So I like to be able to just comment out that function and kind of be more scientific about it and remove variables.
Hmm. Yeah, another benefit is if there was an error within inside any of those functions, the function name will appear in the stack trace as well. So if you were just using one massive long export default function, the stack trace might not be as easy to interpret as if you had things separated out by function.
Okay, so Manjeet is asking where he or she, I'm sorry, where they can find the code for it. I wasn't intending to share it, but sure, I can do that. It is on. This is actually a script that I'm working on right now. I just happen to be working on it, but it's a chaos engineering one. And you can find it there. But welcome. All right, so I also wanted to show this cool new dashboard that is not even made the by the K6 team. So this is called a K6 Reporter, and it's by Ben Coleman in the UK. And it is, I just tried it earlier today. I hadn't, it was kind of on my list, but I hadn't used it before. And I love that it's pretty easy to get started with. So what you have to do is I can't remember if I still have it in my script, but yeah. So you just have to put this line in, and that just comes from the README, and then you copy this one. So two things that you just have to copy and paste. So then you paste it at the end here. So I already have it there, but it's exactly the same. And then when you run your script, so I had already run this. I ran this while we were going, just so I could run it for 3 minutes and have more data to show. But it actually generates a summary file. And it's an HTML one, so I am going to have a look at that. So there's the summary file, and whoa, so many windows. Let me show you what that looks like. Is this not awesome? Look at that, it's so pretty. This is completely free. And it just gives you a nice summary, and it even color codes depending on the response time. You can see other stats here. Even your checks are going to be here. So this is a very nice, friendly interface.
Can you click on failed requests?
Unfortunately
No.
not. Come on, Tom.
Well, that might be a nice feature addition then to then drill down into those failed requests to see
Yes,
more information.
that would be awesome. Manjeet is asking, could you share email ID? I'll write to you to find out how to start it. The best place to get started is the K6 documentation. So that's this, https k6.io/docs. And if you want to ask maybe more questions that are more specific to your use case, I would write to support@k6.io. Sometimes I get questions on like social media, and I don't mind, but I also don't check social media as often as the K6 team supports the community as often as they check the community forum or the support email address, which is support@k6.io. So yeah, I would go there first because you'll get a faster response that way. Okay, so that was my show and tell. Was there something that you wanted to show as well?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Is that something you initiate?
Oh, right. Sorry. Of course, I have to add
Yep.
to the stream.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I was just going to show another repository that I maintain. I'm not able to post in comments, but if you wouldn't mind dropping the link I sent in the chat. It's available
Sure
on
thing.
GitHub. Let's see. I've also got a lot of tabs open, so forgive me. Okay. this is basically it. It's just a K6 example WooCommerce. So it's targeting this website here. It's just a typical WordPress e-commerce WooCommerce website with some default products loaded onto it, and so it's an example of a set of scripts that are employing some good practice bits, some of which we've mentioned already. Like Nicole, I've got my different steps or transactions or groups of related requests split out into different JavaScript files. But unlike Nicole's, I'm just using an empty options object. I haven't defined any options in this one. And so I have an export default function that just goes through each of the different steps in order. Good practice.
Could you just zoom in a little bit?
Oh, yes. I do run on rather
just for people
small.
who are on smaller screens.
I forget how it's done on VS Code.
Oh, well, you're not on a Mac. On a Mac, it's just Command Plus.
Oh. Thank you.
There you go.
All right. I guess this is okay.
Yes, that's way better. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, so I've got sleep statements after each user action that's being performed. That's also a good way to make this script realistic. A real user will probably wait a while after navigating to the home page before adding a product to the cart. And I'm also using a range of values here as part of the sleep statement to make sure that we're randomizing the load. So you develop natural concurrency from doing that. And so if I have a look at one of these individual files, it's a very straightforward GET request to navigate to the home page. And it's encapsulated within a group because there's actually two requests that happen as part of navigating to the home page. And so I want to capture the total time for both of those requests, as well as have the individual time for each one in here. And then I've got this check status function that I mentioned earlier. That's basically, it accepts the response object that we get back from http.get. We're expecting the status code to be 200, so I'm also setting that. And then I have two Boolean flags, essentially, that determine whether or not I should print the response body if there's an error, and also whether or not I should fail the script. And so fail will stop execution of that particular iteration and start back from the beginning. So that it's a useful one because if you start seeing errors, then subsequent requests you make will probably also error or receive unexpected responses. So that just cuts out a bit of noise. You're failing at the first unexpected situation, as opposed to letting a whole bunch of them happen. So if we look at what that function actually looks like. It's this guy here. I think it's pretty much all on the screen. So the first part that happens is we're creating this object that gets fed into the check function, which is part of the K6 built-in API. So every time check status runs, it will also create a check that'll either pass or fail. And if the check failed, and if there was a response body, we'll print it out. I originally had this with this code here, checking for that there was actually something in the body, but sometimes there is actually no body. Like if there was a timeout, then the body object would be undefined. And so if there's a response body, we'll print it out to the console. And if we set to fail on error, then we'll call the fail function, and execution basically stops at this point and goes back to the very beginning of your export default function. So that's all that really does. it's a fairly simple set of scripts. Just open my yeah. As you should probably point out, yes, I'm a Windows user. I'm one of, I think, 3 people in the company that use Windows, but I've been using Windows since 3.1, and I just can't let it go. So
So, James is saying here that he does exactly the same function with the same name and the same arguments. I think, was he talking about the check status one? Well, I noticed that your random int between is already in JSLib, but maybe you should put your check status one there too.
yeah, I was thinking about that. I think we there is something in HTTPX, which was something I believe Powell created, that does something similar, but in more of a functional sort of language, where you have .expect and .is functions and things like that.
Mm.
Yeah, that performs similar kind of steps. But yeah, you're right. Maybe it's time for this to go into the library. The only slight problem with it currently is that I'm putting the response.url in the check, and this can sometimes contain dynamic values, and so you might end up with lots and lots
Yeah.
of unique checks. And you'll see when I run this in my terminal here, there's a bit of output initially, debug output that just prints out all of the different products available on the front page, print out some security and checkout tokens and dynamic tokens.
Mm.
But when it finishes, this is the output I see. So you've got each of the different groups, the checks that take place within each group. You'll see it's got the URL in there. But that means later on down here, we've got an order received URL here with a dynamic value, 2 dynamic values, in fact. And so if you're running this with multiple virtual users, you're going to end up with a lot of unique checks, and that's typically not what you want. So it still needs a bit of improvement. I've been tweaking it over time. It's getting there, but there's probably still a couple of things that need to be added to it to make it really useful. But it's still, still good enough for the purposes here.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps you see straight away when something's not working as expected. In this case, everything ran successfully, so there was no output to show. What I can do now, though, is I can actually cause this to fail. So I think at some point, navigate to checkout, I'm extracting two tokens in 2 different ways. One way is using find between, which is something that is in the JSLib. It basically allows you to feed in the response body, and then one string is what's known as the left boundary. That's the string that's immediately in front of the value you want to extract, and then the last parameter there is the right boundary, so a character immediately after the value you want to extract. So it's a dynamic value that I'm putting into security token, and then later on, when I submit checkout, I think that's where that security token is used. No, maybe it's in this update address script.
Mm.
So without that, this update address script, I happen to know that it doesn't work. So what we can do, if I just find where it is again, I'll just comment both of these out. This will just be undefined, so it doesn't matter if I haven't actually set anything to these values. But let's see what happens now. It still runs the beginning of the script, but now the security token and the checkout token are undefined. We get a response that is just the string -1, and we also see that the check status function is output. We received an unexpected status code. It's a HTTP 403 forbidden when we were expecting a 200, and because we're using we've also got a nice stack trace that lets us know which particular function had the problem as well. I'm guessing it's time to talk about web
Yes, let's
debugging
do it.
proxies. All right. So Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's
because I think the
mhm.
problem is that this is still not as nice and user friendly. Sometimes I just need, yeah, a nice UI to be able to see the HTML rendered if that's what's being returned, you know. I don't want to go through the gobbledygook and just see it all as text. I want to see it actually rendered.
Yep, that's true.
Otherwise, you might miss things like, yeah, the add to cart button is disabled.
Hmm. Yep, yep. It's just very convenient to be able to see, all of the different components of a HTTP request and response in a UI. You have your headers, you have your post data if you're dealing with requests that post things to a server. With responses, you'll have also the headers, but also the response body, and the response body can be in all sorts of different formats. It might be some JSON, it might be HTML. Um, could be XML, hopefully not, but and so web debugging proxies typically provide some means of displaying that data in a more beautiful format. So the one I wanted to show today, it is something that is Windows specific, at least for the free version, and it's called Fiddler. But there are other options available depending on which operating system you're using. The blog post that we talked about earlier that we linked has a few more examples in a table partway down into the blog post. So pick one for your operating system, and depending on your budget. They're usually pretty cheap, though. It's like you buy one seat license and you can use that on your machine for forever, I think, in most cases. But this is Fiddler and the Fiddler Classic, as it's called. So this is this is what Fiddler was originally. Nowadays they have a cross-platform version as well called Fiddler Everywhere. I haven't used it myself, to be honest, but anyway, this is what the UI looks like. It was fairly easy to configure it to start listening in on HTTP. Initially, you might not see HTTPS. You do need to go into the options, HTTPS tab, enable decryption of HTTPS traffic. Doing so prompts you to install a root certificate. That is what allows the proxy to become a certificate authority. And long story short, it allows you to view HTTPS data as in the same way as you'd be able to view HTTP data. It's all been decrypted. If you didn't have that certificate installed, this would all be unreadable, basically. So yeah, just starting it up. Fiddler modifies my host OS proxy settings, so it's immediately able to see all sorts of other traffic. But that's not the case for K6. So if I run my script again here, I don't actually see any of my script traffic. I see that I'm getting responses from the server, but none of the requests appear in here. So the way to do it with K6 is to supply an environment or to set an environment variable, and they're also mentioned in the blog post, but they're basically HTTP underscore proxy or HTTPS underscore proxy. Because I'm on PowerShell, I use this syntax to set it. In my case, the whole website is HTTP, so I just use HTTP proxy. And by default, Fiddler listens on my local machine. It's running locally, and it uses port 8888 by default. And so I can just set that right here, and then I can run my K6 command again, and now I should see my traffic coming through here. So I'll just get rid of some of these previous entries. Here's that request to the home page. You can see this is the add to cart. Look at this JSON. Trying to look at this in the console log might not be particularly appealing, but if I render it at JSON, then it starts to make a bit more sense. In this case, it's JSON that contains HTML, so it's not going to be pretty to look at whichever way you look at it, but it's still
Some things you
better than
can't
nothing.
help.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like you said, some of these, if there's an HTML response, then we also have this web view that attempts to, parse the HTML into a kind of a viewer. It doesn't load images. I don't think it does any JavaScript, but it has some, styling going on. But you can sort of get a feel for what this HTTP response looks like if you were to look at it in the browser. So we've got our products displayed here. I think maybe on the checkout, you can also see that you're on that you're on the checkout page. That we have a form that needs to be filled out, and I think there might even some of these don't have any meaningful content to show. If you wanted to see what exactly went across the wire, you can just go into the raw mode here. So this provides a really nice view on the HTTP conversation. This request failed with the 403. That's the failure that happened as a result of commenting out these the dynamic tokens. So you can see the server's just sending back that -1. And then stopping at that point. All of this other traffic is unrelated to the script. One of the things you can also do is filter, have it only just show non-browser traffic. So that'll get rid of a lot of background noise, but there will likely still be stuff popping up in here that isn't related to the system you're testing. So that's something to be aware of. But yeah, this is now a much nicer environment to look at HTTP requests and responses, and it can be very useful when you're debugging.
That's great. I can actually, unless you want to show something else, I can also show some Mac alternatives if you
Yeah,
want.
yeah, let's do it. I'm curious. I'd love to see
Sure.
what you got.
So for Mac, this is the same script that I was using earlier, but the script doesn't really matter. It's in the running. So same sort of idea that Tom showed, except this is the syntax. You just do HTTP proxy, and then put whatever port your tool wants to is going to be at. So I'm just going to run that, and I'll show you two tools. One is Charles Proxy, and this is not free, but unlike Fiddler, so Fiddler Classic is free for Windows, but Fiddler Everywhere is a monthly subscription, which is kind of the drawback. Charles is a one-off fee, so I think it's a little bit better. One thing that I like is, so you have the normal thing where you get all of these, and this is like
A lot of
requesting
Pokemon.
Pokemon information. Yeah. So same sort of thing. You can see the contents. Oops. So I believe this is JSON, but that was a 200 though. So this is what you might get back if you just output the entire thing in K6. But again, because we're using a proxy here, it's like a really nice, more navigatable experience here. And I also like that they do the structure thing. So
Oh, that's
this
pretty
is
cool.
in chronological order. But if you have many different domains that you're hitting, or different endpoints, then you can see it here. Or like, how many times did I do a search for Mewtwo? So you can also compare that. Oh, I only did one for Buffalant, but three for Mewtwo. Is it really random? Just if you start to see some patterns like that, it's a good way to see that. I've this is another thing. I've also got Wireshark running in the background here for the same thing. The problem with Wireshark is that is a little overwhelming because look, this is UDP requests and TCP, so it records everything. It's not a proxy; it's more like a sniffer. So all network traffic goes through here. So what you need to do is get a filter that will cut out all the noise, and that seems to be a common theme for proxies. But in this case, I'm looking for JSON in particular. You could also do it for like a source or a destination if you just want a certain IP address. I think I had, so let me actually close this one. Stop, because there's just so much. It's
Mm.
kind of freaking out with all of the all of the packets that have been through here. But there, so now we're getting the same information. Just you can go and look at any level. So there's the TCP stuff. If you want to see what which Pokemon this one is asking for, you can look in the headers. So this is looking for Cloyster, and I mean this you can look at it here too, but I rarely do. You can just open up this, oops, you can just open up this JSON here. If I can, oops, whoops, navigate to it. Oh boy. Okay, we've got an object. You can see that there is a little bit of a problem with Wireshark. It's powerful, it's free, it's cross-platform, which is why I use it, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't have the nice interface that Fiddler and even Charles do. I mean, I find this a lot easier to go through.
Yep.
So we're not really saying that one tool is better than the other here. We're just kind of talking about a bunch of different ones, and you should choose the tool that your team is already using, or the tool that you have a budget for, or the tool that works on your platform.
Yeah, this looks really nice, actually. I like the way it was grouping the requests there.
Yeah, that structure one. Yeah. So you can look at it chronologically, but sometimes it's hard to catch it. Or like if you're looking for a specific thing, then you don't necessarily want to have to wait for the script to get to that point, so you can just look for the exact Pokemon, and yet you don't have to remember the spelling of the Pokemon or whatever. You could just look through all of them that had been requested and see.
Yep. I will tell James, I can't write in the chat, but I wanted to let you know that it was in fact your check status function that I might have
Oh wow.
taken a
Yeah,
lot of
so
inspiration from.
oh,
So
okay,
thank you.
so for context, um, James was saying that he also likes to add zero padded incrementing step numbers as a prefix, which I totally do. Okay, I don't do automatically incrementing ones, but I do label it as, 0, 0 for tear down, and then 0, 1 home, 0, 2 for the next action. That way, it's just easier to sort regardless of which results visualization tool you're using or results analysis tool. It's easier to sort when you have numbers there. That's pretty cool. I also want to mention there were a couple of things that other people mentioned from the chat. Mustafa said Burp Suite also has a powerful proxy, although it's mostly used for security. I've never used it. It sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's a great name.
Yeah. And Naveen Kumar was saying that it looks neat if we use Fiddler everywhere.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
curious
so
to try it out. They do have a free trial, so I might have to have a look at that to see how it compares to Classic. And
yeah. I
yeah,
had a look at it. I thought of doing it. It's $10 per license per user per month.
that's quite pricey. Hmm.
Yeah, so it's best for certain situations. It's otherwise you can just install the free trial if you want like a proof of concept or something.
The cool thing with these web debugging proxies is that at least some of them will allow you to generate a HAR file or export a HAR file from any
Yes.
captured sessions. And so that can actually be used to generate a K6 script. And it is also, you're able to point a mobile device to the proxy running on your laptop as well if you're on the same Wi-Fi. or same network. Your mobile will be on Wi-Fi. You can tell it to use a proxy when you define the connection, and that's basically how you would go about capturing mobile device traffic, mobile app traffic. Those scripts can be a bit more complicated because there's a lot of things going on these devices compared to what happens in the browser. But it is definitely possible. We've done that a few times in the past.
Yeah. And I think that there are a lot of emulators and simulators for mobile devices, but sometimes it's still just to verify, sometimes I've used that trick. So you just have to connect your mobile device to the same network as your laptop, for example, have your proxy running on your laptop, then you can set it up. I use an Android phone, so I don't know how to do it on iOS, but there are settings there where you can change the proxy to point it towards a certain port on your laptop. You just need to use the local IP address. And that way, if you already have the app installed, then you can just verify that the requests that are being sent match with, what you've been given by developers, or what you expected to get, because sometimes there are surprises.
Yep, it's true.
And I also think that these proxies are, well, I guess let's also talk about other ways to other proxies that you could use. So we've already talked about Fiddler, Charles, Wireshark, Fiddler Everywhere, Burp Suite from Mustafa. There's also MITM proxy, which apparently means man in the middle proxy. Did you get a
Yeah,
chance to have a look at that? I've never used it.
I did actually. Yeah, I might be able to show it as well. It comes with a web interface, which is pretty good. You need some kind of interface, and
Do you
these
want me
days,
to add it to the stream?
sure. Let me see if I can get it running. So I've just started it up here. Unlike Fiddler, MITM proxy uses.
Oh, so it
Um,
has an interface. I thought it was CLI only.
nope, I think it might be a relatively recent addition. Uh,
Nice.
okay, so yeah, there we go. So it's similar. You
It's
can see
very
the request and
clean
response. It is quite clean,
and
um,
free
and free. Yeah, it's open
and open
source.
source.
Yes, we love it. It doesn't quite have the same. Well, I think it does actually have different ways of displaying data. So it's auto detected that this is JSON, likely because of this.
Mm,
So it has actually shown this in a beautified, prettified way, which is nice. So yeah, this is definitely an option as well. I did find that this install certificates from the menu didn't work for me. So it was
okay.
there was a few more steps one had to do here compared to Fiddler. With Fiddler, it's really just point and click and click, 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 and you're done. With this, I had to kind of do a bit of Googling to figure out how to install the certificate to allow HTTPS to appear. But
Yeah.
once that's there, it gives you what you want, basically.
Fiddler's also been around for a long time, so I'd say it's probably the most fully featured of the ones that we've discussed. Unless,
Yeah.
well, I guess Wireshark is pretty fully featured too, but in a different
Well,
direction.
well, Mustafa's really calling out Burp Suite, so I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah. Maybe we
Next level.
should. Yeah. So I think one thing that I like to do once you get the proxy working, is now, so you have a copy of the requests and responses that K6 is sending and receiving, right? So that's what your load testing script is getting. And then what I like to do is, if it's a website, pull up Chrome and navigate to the website while you have DevTools on, and then you can go through it request by request. It's like, okay, well, this one has 5 requests. How many requests does my script make? Which headers are missing? So then it's like you just do a diff, like you just compare what's different, and maybe that'll help you figure out what your script is missing if you're not getting the results that you were expecting.
Yep, it's definitely a nice feature that I hope we'll implement at some point in the future. Being able to compare the original recording with the replay of your script can give you a lot of hints as to why something might be failing when you replay. It's very good at picking out things like dynamic values, for example.
Yeah. And really, I mean, I say DevTools just because then you can have it in a different window. But
That's
many of
right.
these proxies will pick up both. So
Hmm.
if you, I know with Fiddler, you can, was it color or what? I can't remember what they called it, but you can like highlight
Yes. Yeah.
certain
Hmm.
ones. So you can have it all in the same proxy as well, and then compare.
Yep. I think you can mark requests
Mark, yeah.
in different colors. Yeah.
Yeah, which is actually pretty useful because then that's another variable that you're removing. You know, you're not removing differences between Fiddler. You are removing differences between Fiddler and DevTools. And so the only other difference is what your load testing script is doing wrong.
Yep. That's correct.
Okay, so we are actually running out of time. I feel like you should be on office hours more because I feel like we can keep going, even
Yes.
just the same subject. I think we could keep going on it for a while.
Yeah.
Um, but is there anything, any parting words that you'd like to say?
Oh, yeah. Let us know what you guys thought of this. If there's any proxies you've been using and feel that they're better than the ones we've shown, let us know. I will be looking for a Burp Suite demo soon from Mustafa. Um, but
Yeah,
yeah.
Mark was saying Proxy Man, which was actually in your blog post now that I think about
Hmm.
it.
Yep. But no Mac OS near me, so I haven't been able to try it out myself. But yeah, I like the name, so
Yeah.
must be good. But no, it looked pretty nice. The website was well designed, and I think I saw some screenshots, and yeah, does what it says on the tin, which is what you want with these things. So
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming onto office hours. You should be on more. If
sure.
anybody's watching and would like to get a text instruction of of how to set up something like Fiddler, or if you want to go through one of the other proxies that we mentioned, there are links in the description both to Tom's blog post and to the different tools that we mentioned. And we're not getting, it's not affiliate links or anything. We just use these things. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope this was as interesting as I thought it was, and have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. Bye bye.
Bye.